our first oral evidence is going to be from Dara on the budget. Welcome Louise Ward-Hunter, Head of Central Services and Rural Affairs Group, Graham Wilkinson, Finance Director, David Small, Head of Environment, Marine and Fisheries Group, Chief Executive of NIEA, and Roger Downey, Head of Financial Planning. If I can ask you to obviously keep the presentation as brief as we can, 10 minutes, so that we allow members an opportunity to ask questions, but we do have to be finished by 2 o'clock.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chair. I will proceed as quickly as I can because, of course, we have two quite distinct elements today, and my proposal was, and I agreed in advance, was to separate them both, but I will try and keep my introductory remarks as rapid but as lucid as I can. So thank you very much for the opportunity to brief you on the latest position in relation to the Budget 2016 exercise and the programme for government. If you're okay, I'll start off on the budget, Chair. As members will be aware, we're currently working within those arrangements as outlined by the Finance Minister in his statement to the Assembly on the 14th of June in relation to June monitoring, and again late last month on October monitoring. The Minister at that point set out a more streamlined approach to financial matters. The new arrangements consist of discussions between departments and the Department of Finance on emerging needs, and decisions will then be taken by the Executive on allocations. Those will be communicated more broadly after they are agreed by the Executive, and that in turn will form the basis upon which we discuss the outcome with committees. In that context, while we clearly would always wish to share as much as we can with our committee here today and ensure that you're well briefed on current issues, we are not in a position to discuss any bids or easements that may or may not have been made in monitoring rounds, or to provide details of specific future budget proposals until an agreed position is reached by the Executive. So I must clear that up front. If I could turn to the context for the exercise, budget exercise, I'm happy to provide detail on the financial context that the Department and indeed the wider public sector are anticipating for the 17-18 financial year. The committee is, of course, no doubt aware the Chancellor of the Exchequer will outline the initial implications of public spending in his autumn statement, and that's expected to be delivered on Wednesday the 23rd of November, so not long now. The Executive have agreed to defer consideration of the 17-18 budget until after the Chancellor's autumn statement, and as a result there will indeed be a one-stage budget which will be agreed by the Executive and presented to the Assembly in December or January of next year. The Department of Finance has formally commissioned an exercise to gather information on Department's capital DEL and resource DEL budget positions to assist in future budget planning, and DOF intends to work collaboratively with all departments to develop an agreed position within each department. The Executive have also decided that the budget will only provide a definitive resource budget position for 17-18, and Ministers will be advised of the scale of the challenges that lie ahead, particularly in the context of addressing strategic issues such as the impact of Brexit, clearly a very significant one as we would regard. With the capital budget being less volatile than resource, the Executive will agree departmental capital allocations for each of the 4 years to 2021, and these will then be based on the total capital funding available to the Executive over that period following the Chancellor's autumn statement. I think it's also important to make reference to the statement made by the Chancellor in relation to European structural and investment funds. The Chancellor confirmed that the Government will guarantee EU funding for structural and investment fund projects, including agri-environment schemes, signed after the autumn statement and which continue after we have left the EU. And he was clear that while the UK is still a member of the EU, businesses, farmers and other organisations must be entitled to apply for EU funds, and funding for projects will be honoured by the Government if they are good value for money and are in line with domestic strategic priorities. As a result, businesses, farmers and other organisations will have additional certainty over future funding and should continue to apply for EU funding while the UK remains a member of the EU. Each department will take responsibility for the allocation of money to projects in line with these conditions and the wider rules of public spending, and these conditions will be applied in such a way that the current pipeline of committed projects are not disrupted, including agri-environment schemes which are due to begin in February. So I trust that it gives members an overview of the current process that we're working within, and I would like very briefly to look at the terms of the impact on DARE. Dara by giving you a short summary of our budget and the key elements within them, including our resource savings and capital, because I think that begins to give you a bit of a line of sight on that. In terms of our resource on the side, Dara's starting position for the budget exercise will be the opening position for 16-17. That will roll forward into 17-18, and this will then be adjusted by the executive for any agreed savings to be found in any additional allocations. Table 1 in your written briefs sets out the starting derivation by group, with food and farming being the largest, and includes AFBI, CAFRE and the administration of EU funding. In relation to EU funding, it is important to highlight that the 215.9 million in Table 1 excludes the very significant EU funds which are administered by the Department under 2 separate pillars and currently total around 295 million each year. Table 2 in your document sets out the main constituent parts of the Dara resource budget that will roll forward, and I just give you a very short overview of the key elements. You'll see the most significant element is our staff cost, 116.2 million, which is the residual funding after we completed the voluntary exit scheme in 15-16. This has seen us bring our staffing levels down by 385 full-time equivalents, and that should generate savings annually of around about 14 million. We are, as the committee might expect, finding the loss of this number of staff challenging, particularly at this time of year when we are working very hard to ensure that we get the process payments and get them out to farmers. We're also reviewing our internal processes and procedures post the creation of the new department, and as the committee is aware, we've established a number of projects within the department to consider how we deliver inspections, corporate service advisory functions and customer contact. The next 3 items, as you can see, they relate to GAE and current and other expenditure. They cover the main running costs of the department that's spread across, as you know, across 70 locations. The funding includes rates, utilities, maintenance costs, farm costs, shared services costs, planting costs and travel and subsistence. Next item is at AFBI, and like Dara, AFBI has had a considerable fixed element to its cost basis, but with the majority of expenditure in staff salaries and wages, it took the opportunity to reduce its staffing levels through the VES, and the resultant savings will go beyond providing more secure financial footing ahead for AFBI. Under new Treasury guidance, all research and development expenditure is now recorded as capital rather than resource, and we recognise that as a very positive development. So whilst the capital budget is zero-based, it's not subject to annual reductions in the same way that resource funding is, and that's usually more accessible, therefore, given the Treasury funding principles. So good news for AFBI on that one. The biggest programme, of course, is our RDP programme, Rural Development Programme. You can see that we have match funding allocation of 20.8 million for these schemes, and in relation to 17-18, the level of match funding required will need to be reviewed in light of the decision made around future ANC funding. Other large elements of the programme include the business development groups and the environmental farming scheme. Next 2 lines on the table equate to 18.5 million and are in relation to the TB programme. TB compensation is the largest element, and this statutory requirement needs to be funded each year, and as members will be aware, there's been a significant amount of work undertaken by the TB Strategic Partnership Group, and once that report has been received by the Minister, the financial implications of it will be considered. In terms of resource savings, you will be aware that the public sector, of course, has experienced very great pressure on its finances over the last number of years, and the department has had very difficult financial settlements in recent budget exercises, with DARD having to find over 40 million across the budget 2010 period, a further 29.9 million in 15-16, and of course DARA, as we are now, is currently delivering an additional 11.9 million in 16-17. All parts of the department have been affected by the savings during this period, and inflation has also had to be absorbed, which means that future cuts will be very hard and difficult to find. Turning to capital, as with previous budget exercises, this is to be allocated from a zero base, and as I mentioned at the outset, Chair, unfortunately we are unable to provide members with details of individual capital bids. However, with your forbearance, I would cover just the very main projects that we'll be progressing through the period 17 to 21, and for ease of reference, our capital budget falls under 4 broad headings: programmes, IT systems, recurring capital and research and development. And if I can start briefly with programmes, members will be aware we're in the process of constructing a new office building in Ballykelly. Total value of the contract let is 11.7 million. Under RDP, other key programmes include RDP and TRIPSI. In relation to RDP, the most significant element there, of course, is the Farm Business Development Scheme, which has just recently opened for applications. We currently have a business case approval to fund projects up to 40 million over the period up to 2021. And members will also be aware of the Agri-Food Processing Grant, which is approximately 15 million. Other elements of the RDP include the Leader Scheme, which is a funding of 70 million over the lifetime of the scheme, and rural tourism. The other EU-funded programme we've now launched is EMFF. This equates to some 17 million of funding over the period, and the majority of this funding is from the Executive, with 20% match funding from the EU. Looking now at TRIPSI, we've historically allocated approximately 4 million of funding towards that per annum, and the majority of this funding is capital in nature, with an allocation of 2.2 million in the current financial year. The second main type of capital in the department is IT, and this expenditure allows us to improve compliance and also become a leaner, more digital department in light of the continuing constrained financial position. And the main element is associated within that with the delivery of ICT capability is to support the CAP reform programme. The majority of this funding relates to capital expenditure engaged in the development of software solutions for CAP Reform Pillar 1 and Pillar 2, and significant investment is required to deliver these new schemes, and failure to administer this in accordance with strict EU regulatory requirements could lead to significant multi-million pound disallowances each year, a matter which I am very conscious of as I am the head of paying agency. And NIFAS, briefly, Northern Ireland Food Animal Information System. This is going to replace APHIS and provide ongoing support for the delivery of various business requirements in an increasingly resource-constrained environment. The contract for NIFAS has been let, and we have projected capital costs of 14 million, and the majority of this work is going to be completed over the period up to 2021 and will be reflected in our requirements. The third main type of capital in the department is recurring capital, and mainly relates to the expenditure that the department needs to spend to maintain its assets. We're currently developing a range of projects to develop the estate at Caffrey and at Athby, and the most significant approved expenditure in that is in relation to the replacement of the veterinary science laboratory at Stony Road. And finally, on capital, as from 16-17, research and development expenditure is now classified as capital under the new Treasury guidance, as I flagged earlier. This means that a significant element of work undertaken by AFBI now scores in this budgetary category, and in addition, the collaborative research projects with the Republic of Ireland and the United States will also now score as capital. A final tiny word, if I may, on October monitoring, I think, and that which brings me to my conclusion, Chair. The department had no resource reduced requirements and one capital reduced requirement of 4.3 million in relation to the relocation to Ballykelly. The original capital allocation was made last December as part of the budget exercise, and that was before the contractors were appointed. And the most recent estimates for this project from Department of Finance's Properties Division identified that there was indeed slippage of 4.3 million from this year into 17-18, and this was returned therefore to the Executive as it was ring-fenced reinvestment and reform initiative borrowing, RRI. So there was also a number of technical issues which involved transferring almost £1 million resource and 3.7 million capital to other departments, and in addition we received 0.3 million in relation to the carrier bag levy. So in terms of our resource and capital forecast for 16-17, we're projecting to live within our budgets at this stage of the year, and the assessment is currently being firmed up as part of the January monitoring round. So, Chair, I'll try to go through that at pace for you this afternoon, and the team and I would be happy to take questions from you and members. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Just one first thing I want to check with you. You said that 4 million usually goes to TRIPSI, and in this year it'll be 2.2. Is that a reduction of 1.8 million in this
Hang on a second, sorry, what did Graham?
No, the overall budget remains is £4 million. What Louise is talking about,
was
is
capital
split between resource and
and
capital.
capital.
There's no
Fair
reduction.
enough, I just want
Sorry.
to double check that.
Sorry, was the majority of the funding has been capital in nature? I think that was perhaps my speedy delivery, Chair, threw you off.
I suppose that leads on to my question, which was around FTSE and rural support, because we actually had a presentation here a couple of weeks ago from rural support, and they were saying that they would need additional monies, particularly given Brexit and the additional stress that farmers are under. And I'm just wondering if the Minister is minded to give any assurances in relation to that.
Well, I think at this stage, clearly, we very much appreciate the challenges facing the farming community, and we'd understand that in terms of the quantum of funding, we would want to, as soon as we get our budget allocations, to identify how we might be able to take that forward. But I think Minister would have a very clear appreciation of the very good work that the organisation does in responding to the real need that is out there. And Minister has already gone on record as saying she's very appreciative of the range of pressures facing farmers, particularly with reduced farming incomes and so forth. So I think that will absolutely be on our agenda. It is now.
And just a second question. I was at a meeting last night with about 250 farmers around milk prices. And one of the questions they were asking is that most of the other EU countries are match funding the aid package. Had the Minister any thoughts on that, or were there any discussions had in relation to matching that aid package that was coming? I think it's 4.5 million, isn't that right? For here.
I don't think any decisions have been made on that.
No.
I know that the Minister's considering the kind of interventions that the Department can fund under that package, and the issue of match funding will be one of those considerations, but I'm not sure we've reached a position on that.
Maybe that's something, if when a decision is made, if we could be made aware of it as soon as the decision's made on that, because they were very concerned, I know last night, that you might take a scatter approach with that 4.5 million and really not benefit anybody, which would be their main issue. William?
Thank you, Madam Chair. NAFIS new system. You did say, and if I picked you up right, 14 million. When it originally came to this committee, I think it was something like twice that. What's the change in cost to that? Why is the reason for the change in cost?
No.
I think, William, the original outline business case was over a 15-year timescale, so that was the figures included in the outline business case. The contract is for around 8.5 million, just over 8.5 million, but we also have staff costs included in that as well. So it's looking at the costs over the budget period as opposed to the lifetime of NIFAS.
Okay, because certainly
There has been a significant change in the figures, yeah.
Yeah. When do you hope to NAFIS up and running then? The stage?
Let me just see. Can I draw something?
NIFIS is expected to go live in July 2019.
2019. So there was 2018 in my head, but it must, maybe I've got that wrong,
Yeah, and I could just maybe offer the functionality to support the DAERA's cattle traceability, disease control and public health business areas. That should be available from June 2018.
Something, there was something in my head about 2018, I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
Thank you. I'm going to let Kiva come in to ask a question, and if you don't mind, she's just going to step into the chair for 5 minutes.
Of course, of course.
So my question is just around the estates. The Athby estate, the 8.1, and where are we in the plans with the development of the various different Athby, and the other one was around the 4.3 million that was returned or for the Ballykelly for the headquarters. It was ring fence for this year. Do we need then to plan for that next year if it's slippage? If we need it for 2017, 18, or is it?
Well, I'll ask Graham maybe to pick up on the AFI bit, and if he has a point to make on RRI and actually how that balancing, perhaps either he or Roger might address the second point.
So there are three sort of main projects that we're looking at with AFBI. As Louise has already stated, the project on the Stony Road site has already received business case approval, so that is progressing well. The other two projects that we have in relation to the Hillsborough site and also New Forge Lane, we're currently in the process of developing business cases for both of those sites. So we're currently working through that process. In relation to RRI borrowing, it is loan funding, so it's ring fenced. So that's not funding that we are able to redistribute within the department. So one of the public expenditure rules require us to surrender that money if it's not used for the purpose in which it had been intended. So we will need to bring that forward into our profile into the 17-18 financial year.
Thank you. David?
Thanks, Chair. I'm a bit concerned about the whole issue of the role of this committee at this stage. Louise, you started up by talking specifically in the context of monitoring rounds that you wished to share things, but you couldn't discuss bids and easements until the executive had agreed things. You then said that you couldn't discuss the detail of capital programmes. Can you explain how this committee is going to fulfil its statutory duty to advise and assist the Minister if the Minister is not allowing you to engage with the committee, please?
Well, I think it's less that the Minister is in any way trying to impede our ability to engage with the committee, but rather we're working under the new auspices of the Executive in terms of how Department of Finance is taking forward its responsibilities and in developing the next budget. And within that, I would go back to my earlier remarks that we can only speak and talk to the committee once that process is completed. So I know, I'm quite sure the Minister would not wish to be represented in a way, or would wish me to represent her in a way that goes against the spirit and the authority of the committee. But we are following the process which has now been set out and agreed by the Executive, which has been driven by the Department of Finance.
Okay, I should withdraw my criticism of the Minister, but ask, does that mean it is then impossible under the direction of DOF and the Executive for this committee to actually discuss matters relating to the budget in detail, or do we simply get briefings after the event? In which case, with due respect to officials, there's little point in you being here.
I acknowledge what you're saying, Mr. Ford. I think from our point of view, we want to come and speak to you as soon as we get clarity on the allocation of budgets, and as soon as that is settled, that we can come and engage thoroughly with you at that point. But it is until that is achieved, we are not able to talk about what may or may not be in terms of bids and easements. And as I said today, I appreciate this, that you'll understand the spirit in which we are coming in, which is to give you the broadest sense of where we will be going in terms of the outlines. But at this stage, that is all I can do, other than assure you that as soon as we get accurate figures and our allocation is settled, that we can come and engage with you then. And I don't know whether there's anything you'd like to add, Graham, to that.
I think that's fine.
Well, Chair, I don't wish to embarrass officials any further. They're clearly in an embarrassing position, but it is utterly unsatisfactory for a committee which has a statutory duty to advise and assist, and is being told in a gentle and polite way that we'll be told when decisions are taken.
Oliver?
Yes, I want to ask you about the ENCs. The Minister said that'll not be paid out of Pillar 1, Pillar 2. Has the Minister decided where that money's coming from? And has she been in contact with made any bids for the money?
Well, just Minister, of course, acknowledged that she wasn't going to reduce the basic payment scheme to fund ANC under Pillar 1 of CAP, and she, as I said earlier on, she wasn't going to introduce a transfer. Minister is still considering other options, but given the pressures on both department and the executive budgets, certainly providing any additional support would be challenging. So the matter is still under consideration.
When do we expect to hear? Because this needs to be decided before Christmas. It needs to be in place for January. Now, we're in a very, very short time frame, and the agriculture sector needs to know this by January.
I appreciate that. I don't know whether Graham you'd like to add any more light. I mean, other than as soon as we get our broader allocation, we'll be able to make a decision.
Well, I think the Minister is cognizant of the need to make a decision around this, not least the 17-18 financial years is not that long away. Also conscious of the fact that farmers also need to make decisions as well. So it is something that we are aware of, and the Minister will make her decision once she's considered all of the various issues that are in front of her.
What about from the environment side?
Well, I think we certainly recognise that ANC can make a contribution to the environment. But as Graham says, you know, this will have to be considered in the context of the wider budget position, and the Minister will be considering the options.
Where does it sit in priorities for its contribution to the environment?
I'm not sure it's a case of it sitting in a priority order, Oliver, but it's, you know, we recognise that it can make a contribution. Similarly, you know, various other interventions and measures can make a strong contribution to the environment, like, for example, the environmental farming scheme that we're trying to develop, and various other interventions and measures.
I also think, Oliver, it's worth saying that the ANC previously was subject to ministerial direction because it was really an income support measure, and that, you know, whilst there may be environmental benefits, it's very, very difficult, or it's not possible actually to make a business case to support that, and that's why it was under ministerial direction. So again, that is one of the issues that the Minister is currently considering.
Will we hear something before Christmas? Christmas present?
It's Minister's prerogative. Well, so obviously, it's something that's on the Minister's.
Put the sock out then and hope.
Thank you. Patsy?
It just, at the very start, you outlined the issues there, following up on Mr. Ford's query. You outlined the issues you weren't going to speak about. Could you give us advice just what issues you've been instructed not to share with democratically elected representatives?
I have received absolutely no instruction around what I am not permitted to share with you. What I have stepped you through is what I can talk about. I'm observing the process, Mr. McGlone, which has been set down, agreed by the executive, and set down by the finance minister on what can be shared and by when. So I suppose to be specific, when I said I'm not in a position to be able to outline, as might have been in previous times, issues around bids and easements. So I'd rather focus on what I am permitted to say and the timing at which I can come back and speak to you more fully and in the round.
Well, I'm sure you would, but no disrespect to you at all. This isn't personal at all, but this is the whole purpose of why we're here. To have the checks and balances in place and to have that line of democratic accountability. And it's, I just want to ensure, is that the department's interpretation of that, or is that consistent across all committees? Are you aware?
As far as I'm aware, it is consistent across all committees.
Right, okay. Okay. That's all I need to ask.
Madam Chair, TB, 18.5 million, which also includes private veterinary practitioners. Suppose is that practitioners for TB, or does that take in, say, TB Earl, role of badgers and
That's just for the TV programme for the testing of the animals.
Well, on the back of that, you know, what's the position if there's this trial for TV and if it proves successful, what's the possibility of being rolled out across the 6 counties? They're going to be strapped for cash.
Sorry, you're talking about the
Badger TVR control.
or the TVR control?
I think as Louise has said in her opening comments, I mean, the TB Strategic Partnership Group are developing their report, and I've no doubt there'll be requests for funding as part of that process. So if there are additional requests, we'll have to look at that once we receive the
actual report, yeah.
And that may include rolling out TVR amongst other measures. So you're quite right, there may be a significant ask in terms of funding, but we'll have to look at that once we've received the report and look at the financial information contained within it.
Thank you, Chair. And can I at least go back to the relocations of headquarters and it's like
Yes.
the number of full-time equivalents 385 and savings per year of, is it 14 million? Are you confident, sorry?
Oh, sorry, I
Are
beg
you
your pardon.
confident that can be maintained each and every year, 14 million at no cost to the efficiency of delivering services?
Sorry, you're talking about the voluntary exit
Yes,
scheme. I beg your pardon. Sorry, I'm hearing, I misheard, and I thought you were talking about relocation there. So my apologies for that.
There's an element of that there.
Yeah, there you'll be coming on to. Well, I mean, the reality is that we have an envelope to live within each group. I think I may have mentioned this one of the last times that I was up at committee. Each group has been, for 16-17, obviously had their budget allocation, and within that we also have been applying our own headcount ceiling within it, which takes account of making sure that we work within the full-time equivalent reductions that I refer to, and obviously the budgetary implications that was attendant in that. So Graham, to my left, working with Roger, set out what each group had to achieve. So we have a double lock. Each group has its own budget and it has its own headcount ceiling. We have internal mechanisms. I chair the subgroup which examines how we achieve that, and that means that we have a very clear monitoring process where colleagues David, Robert Huey, and Norman Fulton and I meet on a regular basis to ensure that we are keeping within that. Now that's in terms of the policing of being able to making sure that we deliver on those savings. Within that, we recognise that we have to then reprioritise to meet ministers' priorities and all of the other things that the department is there to do. We have to then make tough decisions about the allocations of resources. So your specific question was, can we keep on living to deliver that? The reality is we have absolutely no choice. We must keep on doing it. We have committed to make those savings. That was the whole point of having the voluntary exit scheme in the public sector, in the wider sector in the first place. And as my finance director sits to my left-hand side, I would not be saying anything different other than we must achieve those savings.
So there would be no possibility of bringing in staff to ease those pressures if they were to come about? It would mean a relaxation of services.
Well, the whole focus is on for us
to deliver the services as we are.
That's about us. That's about us being more efficient and effective, which is where our change programme, and I alluded very briefly to a number of the projects in underneath that, whether it was customer contact or inspections or whatever. And Norman, David, and I all have responsibility each for one big slice of our change programme. So actually, it's about looking at the efficiency and effectiveness of what we do. We're now trying to do that and think about what that means in the context of Brexit, which maybe Graham might want to say a word or two about, because that's the point is, how do you achieve that when we have a very a new environment, a challenging environment, one with opportunities as well, but nonetheless in terms of our ability to respond agilely to what we need to do. So there's a chance, I don't know whether you'd like to add. Graham.
Well, just in terms of our business model is changing. More of our services are being delivered online. Almost 70% of our applications were done to the last application process. So that is changing. We also now have BR-free status, so we're able to redeploy staff from that particular programme into others, such as TB. And the points that Louise made around the way that we do business around inspection, customer contact, advisory, all of those things. So we are looking at how we do deliver our business right across all areas of the department. So things are changing. We are redeploying and better utilisation of the resources that we have because we're under no illusions that.
But we'll be working within the budget.
We will be
working.
working.
Allocation.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly, Chair, to finally ask, 385 full-time equivalents. To me, that eases up our office space. Is there any, I think I may have asked this, but are there any offices or property or what that the department will not require, doesn't need? 385 is quite a bit of space.
It is indeed, and no doubt they will have been drawn from across the entire spectrum of that. I think the ongoing efficiency and rationalisation of the estate remains one, not just for our department, but for at an overarching level. I know it's a plan for the executive, but perhaps Graham might like to add on the specifics.
We may pick us up. We are looking at our estate strategy, you're quite right. There has been a significant change in the workforce and reductions, not just in our own department, but right across. So we are working with the asset management unit within SIB to consider the impact on our estate. And we are developing our own estate strategy as part of that. And would hope to have a draft of that before the end of this financial year. So it's an issue that we're alert to and we're working through the details of that. Particularly looking at, as you say, free capacity, spare capacity that there is right across the estate. So rationalisation will be required.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Just to
Can I just ask, around, you mentioned Brexit, are there significant pressures being faced in terms of resources in dealing with the outworkings of that?
Well, we have created a small team. Graham leads has the oversight for that in terms, and we have a Brexit board. But we very much see that this is a new environment in which we are doing business, and as we will continue to scope that up. I think the very important part for DAERA as a department is DAERA sees itself as one integrated department, a new department, and therefore this is a new environment in which we are working. So the majority of the thinking as we will move forward into the policy dimensions that will be arising, as one might imagine, from Brexit, not that we have 4 distinct business groups and business areas where we have already brought together policy and delivery, but in order to assist us in our early scoping, early engagement and bringing all of that together at speed, and so that we can provide the range of interfaces that we need to do in a coordinated way, we have a small dedicated team which works under Graham's supervision and which reports into a Brexit board to which we are going this afternoon, chaired by the Permanent Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to thank you for your briefing and thank members for keeping their questions brief. I'm sorry that I had to step out there. Just Louise, Graham and David will remain at the table for the PFG briefing, am I right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much for that.
We can keep
Chair,
it as brief as
I
possible.
think I can do this introduction even more rapidly if I may, as long as I don't go too fast that members lose the meaning of it. But this is our first time coming to talk to you properly about PFG and about the context. So I do feel that I need to give you an input up front. I think the important thing for us to flag to you is the context for PFG, the new ways of thinking and working that it requires of us as officials before focusing on the outcome for which DAERA has specific responsibility and the department's wider relevance to PFG overall. So I'm hoping in the next 5 minutes or so to give a sense of that. Committee members will be aware of the genesis of the new programme for government when the parties to the Fresh Start Agreement agreed that a programme for government framework adopting an outcomes-based approach would be development. Not PFG has been informed by extensive stakeholder engagement over the course of the last 2 years, and these indicated widespread support for adoption of an outcomes-based approach. A total of 810 responses were received to the consultation on the draft programme, which was conducted over the summer, and these responses, along with the outcomes of a lot of stakeholder engagement carried out by the executive departments, has been drawn together to produce PFG consultation document, which has been agreed by the executive and is out now for consultation up until the 23rd of December. The Executive's approach to developing the programme for government does represent a new way of doing things, and certainly at the official level we respect that it represents a new way of doing things. By focusing on major societal outcomes, it provides a means by which people and groups from all sectors can play a part in developing meaningful plans and actions to find ways to do things we haven't done before in order to make a real difference to the lives of our people and within our communities. The use of an outcomes-based approach has gained currency internationally in recent years. It has been used, for example, with success in other jurisdictions, including in parts of the United States, in Finland, and near to home in Scotland. And last month, many civil servants, public servants, and representatives of the voluntary and community sectors had an opportunity to hear much more about this at the Outcome-Based Accountability Summit conference, which was held last month. And Mark Friedman, the international authority in this, spoke, and I'm sure members got a chance to meet him at the event that then was held up at Parliament Buildings. I am working through the book steadily. The OECD has recently underlined our commitment to an outcomes-based approach and recommended that we prepare and implement a multi-year strategic outcomes-based programme for government framed by a vision for Northern Ireland's people and its economy. And I think that being outcomes-based does bring the focus into things that really matter for the citizen. It does require a collective approach looking to draw in all of the contributions within government and beyond government to make the biggest differences possible. And outcomes express the societal impacts and situations of well-being we want to get to. And as you would imagine, by involving those who actually matter in their delivery, we learn how we should get there. Just a brief word about where we are in terms of that process before I turn to DAERA's role in it all. Yeah, as I said before, there's been widespread support for the approach. The original document, which was launched in May, had 14 strategic outcomes and 42 key indicators. That was covering a very wide range of activities designed to reflect the Executive's ambition for Northern Ireland as a whole. And for each indicator, there were specific measures which were selected to track progress. The current version of the document, which was launched last month, which took account of all that feedback, reflected that feedback through the engagement and consultation process, and particularly on the need for clearer links between each outcome and the primary indicators that support it to allow us to measure our progress. So there are now 48 proposed indicators to underpin the 14 strategic outcomes. And the outcomes-based accountability model, the OBA, says that usually between 3 to 5 indicators per outcome is what works best. And I think the efforts are now all focused on making sure that those indicators is measurable in a very open and transparent way, and where those indicators are still being worked up on the underpinning action plans, that we make sure that we have those done in a way which is open and transparent. Looking now at DAERA's specific area of ownership within PFG, as a department whose work spans economic, environment and social dimensions, clearly DAERA has a substantial role to play in contributing to a range of outcomes within PFG. However, the second outcome is one for which we have specific responsibility. That outcome, as you're aware, is we live and work sustainably, protecting the environment, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. DAERA will also make essential contributions to the economic outcome in the PFG, which is described as we prosper through a strong, competitive, regionally balanced economy, and its related indicators through our support for the agri-food and fisheries sectors. I mean, clearly, the committee well appraised of the vital contribution the agri-food industry makes to the Northern Ireland economy. We account for 5.5% of total employment in NI, contributes to turnover of almost 5 billion, and farming and processing industries contribute a gross value added of 1.1 billion per annum. So clearly the agri-food industry, we're very pleased to see that at the foreword of the new document, agri-food does get a mention this time in the opening remarks. And the commitment in the PFG towards supporting a diverse export base and higher levels of productivity are all areas where DAERA has and will play an active role. But that's not the only area to which clearly we will contribute. The Department can also contribute to wider health indicators through our management of forest and country parks and the regulation of air quality. And of course, the Department contributes to the well-being of rural communities through a range of interventions. And while the PFG expresses its outcomes for all citizens, DAERA, of course, we are reflecting on the ways in which our work addresses those outcomes from the perspective of the rural dweller. So I think that that is an important issue to say. But back to our own outcome, for which David has lead responsibility. Our health and prosperity depend on our natural environment. Achieving economic growth at the cost of environmental degradation through overexploitation or pollution isn't sustainable. So DAERA, therefore, seeks to deliver positive environmental outcomes in tandem with growing the Northern Ireland economy. And in terms, very briefly, of how we've approached our contribution within shaping up PFG, we held a number of successful workshops with environmental NGOs and other stakeholders to facilitate the process. Some of the feedback from those groups was instrumental in shaping the approach to the key indicators which the Department will now deliver. And following the consultation process, revisions were made to the programme for government, and there are now 6 indicators under outcome 2. We have primary responsibility for 5 of them. They relate to greenhouse gas emissions, the percentage of household waste which is reused, recycled or composted, air quality, water quality and biodiversity. And the other indicator for this outcome relates to the percentage of journeys which are made by walking or cycling or public transport, and that particular indicator will be delivered mainly through the Department for Infrastructure. So the initial consultation included an indicator on sustainability with greenhouse gas emissions as the sole measure, but respondents to the consultation considered this to be too narrow, and then taking that on board, the additional indicators on water quality and biodiversity have also been added. So I do think that in terms of the power of the iterative nature of this process, the ability for those with strong interest, vested interest, informed interest to come and be heard, that has certainly been part and parcel of how the Department has conducted its approach to be able to shape up the range of indicators that are now in the current document. Delivery plans have now been developed for 3 out of DAERA's 5 indicators, and delivery plans remain for water quality and biodiversity. They remain in development. So our process around that is really about trying to capture the relevant actions from all of our delivery partners and as a way of delivering an effective approach to delivering the desired outcomes. So again, my apologies, Chair, at pace, but I do appreciate you're under time. But that's I hope that sets out the DAERA stall for you on PFG.
Thank you, Louise, I appreciate that. I suppose my concern is that in response to the consultation, I know there were concerns raised about rural not being really in there, not being mentioned. And I accept what you're saying about some of the indicators are obviously relating to everybody, regardless of whether you're rural, you're urban, or where you live. But my concern is, will it be properly rural-proofed? How will the Department ensure that it is? Because if you look at some of the decisions that are already been made, and I'll just take an example today. The reason I had to step out here is because we have a number of staff from Cookstown, Ballynahinch and Newcastle Social Security offices, because the Communities Minister is proposing to close their Social Security offices. None of those decisions were properly rural-proofed. Now, when I looked at what they called rural-proofing at my 8-year-old child, to do better, it was disgraceful, and that's putting it mildly. Because really what they did was took their figures from a mile radius of the town. Right. Well, Arboe is a long way from Cookstown. It's certainly not within a mile of the town, but they use Cookstown Social Security office, and that's just one example. So I have a real concern, and we wrote to the DAERA Minister to ask her if she could speak to her party colleague, executive colleague, in terms of, you know, really doing a serious rural proofing exercise on it, and that doesn't appear to have had any impact whatsoever. So I would have real concerns that this department is going to ensure that other ministers rural proof their decisions, and if we're not going to do that, all of this is a waste of time, and that would be my fear. But if the department can tell me that how they intend doing it and convince me that they are going to do it and do it properly, I'm happy with what's there. But it's ensuring that it is rural proofed. At the end of the day, we are the the committee for protecting those rural dwellers, our agriculture people and the environment. So that's where my focus is.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for those comments. I appreciate the challenges that there are in terms of making sure that that rural proofing and that the needs of rural dwellers remain always on the agenda of every department in terms. But I still see that the programme, from my perspective, I think that the programme for government, in terms of its sweep, its thrust of trying to look at things in a more cohesive way with a greater cross-departmental working and engagement, does create the environment for those behaviours where the agenda, I suppose, around ensuring that rural proofing can be taken forward effectively is there, because there's something around the more we can engage with others and contributing to the outcomes of others, that gives the department a locus. But specifically on our responsibility for rural proofing in relation to the Rural Needs Act, that goes to the heart of how we engage, I believe, in terms of our not only our strategic engagement with local authorities, and I know that that's a matter that we've talked before at the committee, but clearly with other departments in terms of what does it mean to engage people and say this is how you do it, and the sorts of guidance and support that we can offer sister departments in being able to do that. So your point is well made, Chair, with relation to the continuing work that I appreciate you will know, and I have said it before, that it is a very small team working on that, but nonetheless it's about trying to engage with other colleagues at a strategic level and equip them with the knowledge and skills and the and inspire them to be able to see what they're doing in the round to factor the rules put in. So we do have every single department has a responsibility in this quite clearly. That's nothing new that the Rural Needs Act bill or act, as it will be, brought onto the table. The previous executive was already committed to this, but the issue is in the execution. So we will maintain our commitment to reaching out and to support where we can through engagement and the transfer of skills so that others can take it forward.
Okay, I accept that. I just think the Minister needs to drive this. I'm not looking for a response on this. The Minister needs to drive it, and we as a committee will be holding her to account, and I suppose I'm asking you as her officials to ensure that she is aware of that. We will be holding her to account on the fact that she must ensure that her executive colleagues rural proof every decision they make.
Thank you.
Eva?
Thank you, and thanks for that. I think even the inclusion of those two new indicators within that outcome is a good indication of how the process has worked, and you can be responsive to the feedback from the consultees. I was just wondering if going forward, how considering the need for partnership and working with the various stakeholders and partners in actually delivering and rolling out the programmes, how that will be done in the practicalities of that
sort of way. Well, I think it might be helpful. I appreciate we were talking initially about the strategic bit that cuts across all, the rural agenda across all, but if perhaps we put the location of your question in what we're absolutely doing about the outcome for which we have lead ownership, maybe that might give you more idea, and if that's okay, I'll pass to David to give a bit of sense of that.
And I don't want to cut off discussion.
No.
We can keep responses as brief as possible. We do only have 15 minutes. I want to give every member an opportunity to.
Okay. So there were two key themes to the new programme for government. One was that it was outcome focused, and the other was that it was collaborative, so that we would be working in collaboration with other partners. And on the two new indicators that you've mentioned, particularly water quality, we will certainly have to work in partnership with other delivery partners. For example, the Department for Infrastructure, and we've already had meetings and engagement with the Department of Infrastructure, with NI Water, because their interventions will make an important contribution to delivering on the water quality indicator. Similarly, on the recycling indicator, we've had good engagement with councils. Councils have statutory responsibilities for waste, and we've had very good engagement with councils through a kind of workshop approach, trying to identify the contribution councils can make towards improving how they go about recycling. With AFI, we've worked on transport initiatives in terms of the contribution that can make to the air quality indicator. So we fully recognise the need for collaborative working with other partners. We probably still need to do a bit more work in terms of how I, as SRO, with my colleagues, engage with the other partners and make sure that that's an ongoing engagement, so that as well as contributing to the shape of the delivery plan, they will actually be key partners in delivering the actions as well.
Okay, thank you.
Carl?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, now I'm slightly disappointed with the programme for government for this committee, or this department even, because when I read through it, it appears as if we never amalgamated. This to me looks like a department for the environment, because the 6 key indicators state it's all to do with environment: natural built environment, combat climate change, waste management, greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, sustainable transport, water quality, biodiversity, and natural capital. So, I cannot see where there's a lot leaning toward the agri-sector at all. All it says is going to ensure that sustainable practices are promoted, work with stakeholders, agriculture and marine, to establish sustainable management practices which safeguards biodiversity and natural capital. And to me, management, I have a fear of management, because those who are going to come to work with the farmers don't normally work with the farmers, but they make the farmers work not in farm practices, but running more in an environmental holding. And I honestly don't see anything in there that is really can take our, there's no mention of what we're going to do for the milk producers, for the Brexit, how we're going to export our goods. There's no mention of it whatsoever. So to me, there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, if I can respond first on the issue of how it looks from the lens of trying to see the department identified within it. I think that we're in a different way of working. That's what I was paying Sir Key to try and say in terms of what the executive's vision is, that the outcomes, while departments nominally and the permanent secretaries between them of all the departments own each different permanent secretaries own different outcomes, but the point is, it's not meant to be saying that just because one permanent secretary owns that others aren't involved. And I think very strongly, if you look at the issue of the economy, for example, if I could point to that one, which is the very first outcome, that we have a huge contribution to make there. In relation to issues around productivity, if you look at the work that we're doing and export and trade, some of the indicators that they are using in there, the agri-food industry is front and centre in that. And if you look at the sorts of work that we do in terms of, if you think about AFBI or think about CAFRE, if you look about the issue of the R&D and skills and innovation, all of that is connecting. So I do appreciate that it's not saying, and that bit stares, but actually part of our engagement is about ensuring that we work with the Department of Economy on its appropriate strategies, which will sit underneath that. Sorry.
Just to add to that, Louise, we have been working on a strategic plan, so that will, the point that you're making, Harold, you'll see a bit more of our own department within that, but also embedding our programme for government outcomes as well. So we are working on our strategy out to 2020 and beyond. So that will give a bit more flavour and a bit more texture as to what our organisation is doing, not just on the environment, but also on the agri-food sector as well.
I think what you're identifying, Mr. McKay, is that there is a key theme on the environment. And so therefore, a number of the indicators which link through that key environmental theme have fallen to me, because I head up the environment group within the department. But equally, Louise points to the economic theme. And that's how the programme for government has been developed. So there are 14 outcomes. One of them happens to be environmental. So that's why, from my point of view and from their point of view, you will see an environmental slant there. But as Louise says, on that economic outcome, the economic thing, this department will be making very strong contributions through its work on agri-food, through its work on fisheries, through its work in creating rural jobs under the LEADER and rural development programmes. So we will be making strong contributions through the economic strategy when it's refreshed, which will feed through into the economic thing. And I think what's happening is that some of the activities that we lead within the department in terms of agri-food and fisheries have been kind of, their prominence, I suppose, has been lost a bit because they are now within an economic economy theme. Rather, so it's not agri-food, but agri-food is a key part of that. Whereas the environment one happens to be a bit more overt because there is a core theme around the
So almost, agriculture is almost the wrong department.
It's not that it's
Should be in
another
the economy.
department. It's not that it's another department, but one of the core themes for the executive programme for going forward is the economy, and our department will make a strong contribution into that.
Yeah. So for instance, if you look at that indicator of external sales, part of how we would contribute to that would be the facilitation of export-led growth through negotiating. I'm thinking about our veterinary side, through negotiation of export health certificates in line with industry priorities, opening up new markets and so forth. I think it is a different way of seeing the world. I can assure you, Mr. Key, we are alert and engaging with sister departments to ensure that the contribution that the agri-food industry made, it does have prominence. Sorry, Chair.
We're actually getting a presentation on the 1st of December on the business plan and mid-year progress report, and I think that it is extremely important that we get that well in advance of the actual presentation here to the committee, because to be fair to Harold, that would be very helpful, I think, to all of us in terms of setting that against the PFG and seeing where they fit together. But if we don't have it in time, it makes it very difficult and makes my committee members very cross. To be fair to them.
Apologies,
I think
Chair,
that
for
it will make things a lot clearer, and we'll have an opportunity then as committee members to do that prior to the actual presentation, because otherwise it's very difficult for us to get good questioning in, and if we can get that paper well in advance of the meeting, we'd be very appreciative.
I understand, Chair, and we'll adhere to that. I think it's being able to draw those threads through is on a paper around that. We'll take that forward.
And that's, I suppose, how we'll be able to do it.
Yes, yeah, understood.
David?
Thanks, Chair. I think it's unfortunate in the consultation document that the indicators are anything but smart in the way they're set out. The delivery plans certainly put a lot of flesh in at least some areas. I wonder if David could give us any idea as to how we're getting on in terms of preparing delivery plans around biodiversity and the water quality issue, especially as I'm intensely suspicious of anything which only has a bar chart with 3 years showing and no real trend line.
Okay, water quality, the delivery plan has been developed. We're just trying to finalise that at the moment. Slightly further ahead on that one than we are in biodiversity, but we are working with stakeholders with the on biodiversity delivery plan. Both in terms of what the measure might be, because that's going to be quite difficult, but also in terms of what the specific actions and interventions will be. So it's slightly behind the water quality one, but I would hope within the next couple of weeks we will be bringing both to a conclusion. And as you know, the other three...
And to committee, I trust?
Well, through the ministry initially. But the 3 delivery plans that we have completed are already available through the PFG consultation process. As soon as
although they're not immediately visible on the website.
No, you need to go in through the links. I agree.
Well, I tried to and couldn't find them.
Okay, they should
it's
be
like
there.
into IT
They should be there. You won't find
They're in the pack.
for water quality.
Oh no, yes, I mean I've read them in the pack. I then tried to see how publicly accessible they were, and as a member of the public, I can't find them.
Okay, we'll take that away.
Under the Programme for Government link,
Yeah.
they should be available. As I said, the delivery plans for water quality and biodiversity are being finalised, but they will then become available too.
Thanks.
Thank you, David. Oliver?
Just very quickly, can I ask, what sort of matrix do you use for rural proofing?
Well, part of what we've been, the team have been working on is to develop something that we can take out. I don't have, I can't give you a neat answer on what that matrix looks at the moment, but I'm sure I'd be very happy to provide an insight into the work we've done so far on that.
What do you take for rural proofing? Do you consult with the rural white paper?
I mean, part of the work of the team that has been taking forward the Rural Needs Bill /Act has been to look at the interpretation of due regard, and therefore what that means in terms of departments.
The rural white paper.
Yeah.
It went before
that. Oh yes, yeah, and to build on that.
Has the rural white paper been used to rural proof any decisions coming through for the PFC?
On PFG overall, as it stands at the
I
moment.
think we have looked at today, has the rural white paper been used?
I beg your pardon, Mr. Wickleman. Yes, I understand that the point that you're making. I don't know the answer to that, but I could take that back to the Executive Office and ask.
Well, it's quite explicit in that there that all departments were for rural proofing.
Yeah.
It's in that rural white paper and all departments have signed up to it. And if you tell me now that you haven't used it, then I would like to know what yardstick you're using for rural proofing, because the rural white paper is quite clear.
I take your point, and I think that the only way that I could understand that at the moment would be to put a question, take that question back and put it to the Executive Office to ask, do they, because they have the line of sight across all of the departments in terms of
I'll be interested to hear what they have to say.
Okay, we can certainly ask.
And even a written briefing would be very useful on how, excuse me, on how you plan to rural proof the 5 delivery plans that this department has responsibility for. So, I mean, that's something that can very definitely be, I suppose, answered by this department, and the others then is a separate thing. But if we could get a written briefing just on that would be useful for members, I think.
Yes, okay.
Very quickly. Sydney, very quick question, very quick answer.
Thank you, Chair. Environmental crime. I'd just be interested to note the position from the department on how we tackle environmental crime within and outside the waste sector. I say it referred to in the first draft of the PFG, but I think the sentence now the need to tackle environmental crime occurring within the sector doesn't refer to that. Is there any reason why? Can you explain that?
I'll pass to David on that one, on the environmental.
I'm not actually sure. I didn't pick up the full question. So you
Yes,
referred to
refer to the need to tackle environmental crime occurring within and outside the waste sector. That's not referred to that particular comment, not in the
yeah. Well,
the second.
It's not. It doesn't feature as a key indicator. We have been in regular contact with the Department for Justice in terms of trying to ensure that the contribution we make in dealing with environmental crime is reflected as far as we can in terms of the contributions we can make to the wider crime outcome, and there may be opportunities on rural crime to ensure that the contribution this department can make on rural crime is probably.
I think the Minister's already indicated that's a priority for her, so I'm not sure that it's...
Yeah.
But again, it's the issue of how prominent it is, and like on an awful lot of other issues, not every particular interest area is clearly visible in the programme for government, because it is a very
big issue
document. Yeah, it's a
very big issue.
But it's a very high level document. But we can take that issue away just in terms of rural crime and how we might be able to give it more prominence.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Waste as a whole is a very big issue, and I'm not even sure that waste crime is anywhere near the biggest part of it, but that's a conversation for another day. Listen, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming along here today.
Thank you, Chair.
And just members, are you content that we write to the key stakeholders as we did previously on the first draft of the PFG? Nilga, Solis and RAP, asking if they have comments or concerns in relation to the PFG? Yeah, content. That's great. Okay, thank you. And our next meeting then is on Thursday morning, and we're meeting a wee bit early at 9:30 in room 30.
Okay.
Okay? Yes, that's good.